Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Welcome to the Frontline updates. We have a lot of things to talk about, really good ones. Ukrainians have gone on the offensive. It's not some kind of big offensive, but they're definitely counterattacking in the places that matters. Let's see how well they're doing, and let's talk about the future prospects and what can we expect in changes in the front line and whether it is critical or not, because we see different opinions appearing online. Let's jump into it. Before we jump into the map, I want to cover point and laugh section of Russia. Putin dressed up as a military commander and met up with Gerasimov, where Gerasimov on camera made statements about how well Russians are doing, and it is truly fantastic. This is obviously all circus, and Gerasimov was sort of sweating a little bit, and they were explaining that, in reality, there was not a lot of things that we actually achieved, but they couldn't just say that we didn't achieve anything since the last time we talked about this. And instead, Gerasimov just decided to lie. So he talked about, in the Kupyansk region, he says that all of this is already pretty much encircled, that Russia is completely in control. Then, with regards to the Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, they also stated that this whole area as well is encircled. And in general, they're stating we're having over, I believe he said like in personnel, that's like over 30,000 Ukrainian troops encircled. And even the closest Z propagandists, the most people that look at the map and say like Russia is winning and only winning, they just completely laughed Gerasimov and Putin out of the room for, first and foremost, this clown show with dress up, and secondly, the whole information about that Ukrainians are encircled. But this is just a warning. If you hear that Ukrainians are encircled somewhere on the front line, this is where it's coming from. Point and laugh, as I said. But let's jump into the action and talk about what is actually happening on the front line. We've seen a number of Ukrainian counterattacks, but I believe that it is wrong to just bunch them all up together. So instead, I'm going to discuss these counterattacks step by step. Firstly, let's talk about situation in Pokrovsk, because this is the main fight. Russians here have had certain success inside of the city. Ukrainian sources have been stating that a lot of the logistic roads in ranges are pretty much non-active because of the Russian drone control. And the only way that Ukrainians are able to get logistics into the area is by using drones, basically air support. And this is obviously not fully sustainable for a full type of defense of the city. So right now, Russians have infiltrated Pokrovsk city itself. There are fights already happening close to the center of the city. However, I do not believe that this is accurate to state that Russians are already fully in control of center in the city, because what we see is some of the Russian infiltration groups, like small groups that are just scattered around the city. This is not yet major Russian forces. So we cannot say that Russians are in control, but there are definitely groups that are attacking, and Ukrainians are not here in a safe area. So the fight is ongoing. And we now get reports that Ukrainians are sending their intelligence special forces into the area, and this can mean two things. Number one, they want to push back against Russians in key directions to make sure that Russians get kicked out of the main areas of Pokrovsk, because before there is a critical mass inside of the city. And then Ukrainians will continue holding Pokrovsk and will continue securing this area of operations. So I expect that they will be attacking these areas somewhere here and probably also move throughout the city, and we might see some kind of other cutting in this area. So far, we have confirmed Ukrainian clashes in here, in here, in here, and actually also something was reported here, but that was a smaller one. What I would monitor here is I would monitor this area right over here, because whatever is happening is going to be defining for this area. Because the second option why these attacks by the Ukrainian special forces could be is if Ukrainians need to pull out from a tough position and then kind of equalize the front line sort of towards this area. So we need to watch what is happening to this zone of operations. And if Russians suddenly start appearing in this zone of operations, there will be videos. That means that Ukrainians are moving out, and all of these attacks in Pokrovsk area are just essentially to allow for more orderly retreat of Ukrainians from the firing zone. I'm going to move myself to the left so you can see a little bit better. But specifically, why I'm talking about that area and why I'm not completely sold on the prospect that Ukrainians are pulling out of Pokrovsk and this area specifically, is because Ukrainians are actually doing quite well on the Mirnograd. This is kind of the brother town to Pokrovsk. Like if this is Pokrovsk, this is Mirnograd. They're kind of almost united in a singular agglomeration of towns. But it is because Ukrainians are actually doing quite well on this northeastern part of Pokrovsk. So they are actually quite successfully pushing back at Russians at certain key directions. More specifically, they are able to push back around this Novoekonomichne area. There have been fighting in the area, with Ukrainians stopping some notable Russian pushes, and even we had certain videos of Ukrainians counterattacking. Then we have additional footage showing Ukrainians attacking in this direction towards Fedorivka and actually kind of going quite in depth into the Russian positions. We talked some months ago about the potential encirclement or cutting off the head of the Russian attack. And this attack definitely by Ukrainians is looking like this, because especially they are controlling this access to Razine. If they're in control of Fedorivka and Razine, this will cut off this part. And we also see that in these directions, Russians are trying to attack, but they're not successful. You're seeing the video right now. In this direction, Russians tried to attack towards Mayak, Pankivka, Volodymyrivka, but they were very unsuccessful, and Ukrainians actually burned down quite a lot of vehicles, and other vehicles just run into the bog because of the bad weather and completely sank. So it's kind of crazy to see that Russians are trying to attack into this direction, but so far it is a victory after victory for Ukrainians, specifically in this sector. It doesn't mean the situation is easy for Ukrainians, but it does mean that the situation is good. Then there is management of this whole breakthrough. You might notice that since the last time we talked, there was a little bit of Russian pocket that is now completely gone, which was here around Chasiv Yar. Here, Ukrainians actually completely liberated the area, and it is now absolutely under Ukrainian control. We've seen videos from the area where Ukrainians have secured the settlement, waving their flags, and more than that, they're actually even showing some of the captured Russian soldiers. So it is absolutely clear that Russians that were encircled in this area finally have been sliced and diced. And recently, we've also seen some of the Ukrainian attacks towards this direction, which actually is now threatening this encirclement right over here. So I would not be surprised to see in additional month that additional forces that Ukrainians will be pushing into this area and will stop any kind of Russian attacks in the area. They will also liberate this encirclement. And again, this undermines the whole Russian northern position. So I do not feel that Pokrovsk is anywhere near to be surrendered, but I do feel that we need to look out for the next 2 weeks how specifically Ukrainians are planning to take this operation further. Then we got some news from area, you won't believe it, Chasiv Yar. Yes, Chasiv Yar. It's the next city after Bakhmut, the city that was captured supposedly million years ago. And then the next obvious one was Chasiv Yar that Russians supposedly also captured. Well, we got some videos of Russians trying to attack from the Chasiv Yar direction towards this area of Chasiv Yar right over here. And they get absolutely slapped. It was pretty nice to see that despite the Russian attempts to overtake their positions at Chasiv Yar, we were absolutely right on this channel, and Russians just cannot do it. So despite all of the Russian attempts, despite of their best efforts, they are still not really advancing past Chasiv Yar. More than that, they're still barely advancing past Toretsk. And actually, there are some reports that Ukrainians are able to liberate some smaller settlements. But again, it's not confirmed, so I'm not going to tell you, around Toretsk. So all these big victories that supposedly Russia achieved during this year account for absolutely nothing. But the good news don't stop there. We also have some great news around the Lyman area. Now here, as you know, Lyman is the center key point that Russia wants to capture. Their goal was pretty obvious. They want to attack from the north towards Lyman. They want to attack through Kholoniozy Stavki towards this direction. They want to attack from Zarichne to help move towards Lyman. And they want to move through Yampil. Around Yampil, they have a certain resistance by Ukrainians, and they're having big trouble. They were having some success at the north, but it has slowed down significantly. And the same was also slowed down at the north. We almost in the last week, we see very minimal advances of Russians in this area. But more than that, we saw Ukrainian counterattacks, and actually there is a settlement right beyond Zarichne here that was liberated supposedly by Ukrainians. So if this is additionally confirmed, I mean, we have videos that supposedly confirm it, but we're just double checking. So if this is indeed true and Ukrainians are able to liberate this area of Torske, this will actually allow Ukraine to now put some pressure on this Lyman direction of Russians and essentially prevent Russians attacking also from the southern side. So if this settlement liberated, this might mean that this area of advance for Russians is now cut off. We know that Mikhailo Drapati, that what I told you last time, he has taken control of this whole area of operations, and the reports are that he got one of the largest groupings of forces in his control, and he's a great crisis commander. He has been saving Ukraine for a long time with great success. So if whatever we're seeing around Lyman is going to continue, and Mikhailo Drapati indeed going to deliver on his previous results, then I'm getting less worried about the Lyman direction as we go along. Same is also in Kupyansk. We saw not that much advances of Russian in Kupyansk. Their plan is clear. They're going straight through the city, all the way down, and they want to try to essentially undercut Ukrainians and move all the way kind of along this road and to kind of push Ukrainians out of this pocket. We saw Ukrainians slowly kind of move away from the most exposed positions in the pocket. I think they're being prepared to withdraw because, to be honest, there is not much here that is of significant value. I know like every single settlement of Ukrainians is important, but Ukraine is not fighting this war for a specific settlement or even a big city or even everything else. They're fighting to survive and to keep themselves as a country. So talking about Kupyansk being attacked, while there is reports that Russians are trying to move into Kupyansk, we saw some Ukrainian attacks at where I was telling you about, trying to undercut this whole little salient altogether. However, this attack was very small. It was just 2 armored vehicles of Ukraine. So I think it was more of a probing attack, scouting attack on what kind of like Russian defenses there are in the area. It is, again, going to be dependent on what Mikhailo Drapati is going to decide. But I do feel that Ukrainians are trying to be a bit more proactive now with their counterattacks towards Russians. But another part of Frontline that got activated was around Vovchansk area. Here, Ukrainians reported that Russians suddenly put additional reserves into the operations, and they're starting advancing specifically in this area over here. If you look at the map closer, you see the city of Vovchansk, where Russians are, I mean, like, they have been there for a while. But then suddenly they started kind of advancing in this area towards the west of Vovchansk. And this was not very nice by Ukrainians. So Ukrainians very tactically actually used a bit of Russian tactics in this area. And they actually targeted a dam of this over here river. So there has been now videos of this dam sustaining certain damage and water flowing from the river. Now this is not the same as breaking the dam of Kakhovka in Dnipro. Dnipro is a massive river. This river is not as massive, this Donetsk river, but this river does go specifically to the direction where Russians are attacking, and this increase in water flow in this river right over here, and specifically also this direction over here, can really hinder some of the Russian operations in the area. So very good strategic move by Ukrainians to help slow down any kind of Russian activity in the area. Potentially Ukrainians were pulling some extra forces from these directions to help reinforce more key areas around Frontline. Thank you so much for making this far. To help elevate this video in the algorithms so more people can see it, press the subscribe button. This is very important for YouTube algorithms. In any case, we see Ukrainians going on the offensive. Russians are not really increasing their tempo of advances. It's not going well for Russia, and they're living in their own dream fantasy land, trying to report to Putin and sound all tough and powerful like. It's not the case, but it's good to see that Ukrainians are fighting back, so support Ukraine, trust in Ukrainian armed forces. I love you. Slava Ukraini, and I will see you next time.